Praise to bring you the front butters on Swick News TV. I'm Blessing Eichie. This is Wednesday. We've come midweek so far in the last week, the last full week of the month of March 2025. I run with two gentlemen who are brilliant, who are energetic and passionate about bringing change to Nigeria, to Africa, and across the globe. Are you passionate about bringing change? That means you're the right audience for the show because we tackle critical issues just so positive change can happen. Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze and Oyinpreye Krumale are here with me this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Blessing. Like Jeff Bezos says, you can be grinding for 4 years with no result. But all of a sudden, in the 5th year, you change the entire world. So the power of not giving up is real.
Yes.
And I think we should keep trying.
Yes, consistency is it. Pri,
yes.
how are you doing today?
I'm okay. Good morning to you, Doc. I like the word you used, the power of not giving up. Well, if you are a Nigerian,
to even go to Yoruba side.
if you are a Nigerian, if you are a Nigerian and you give up on yourself or any of your aspirations, I think you need to be checked again. Your DNA needs to be
really
checked
you are
again.
Nigerian, because Nigerians are resilient people.
Yes.
Oh yes, we're not rubbing it in your face if you are not Nigerian, but we're saying that resilience is needed in everything you do in life so that you can actually keep pushing until you get the achieved results. There's a story that really caught my attention, and that's the story of foreigners, but using the way they're called on the street, like local language, Oyibo people claiming they're indigenous of Ekiti State. That story really caught my attention. I was wondering really how, because we can see you clearly. Your physical features tells you're not. Now, even if you stayed long enough to become a resident, but to claim your indigenous, it's a good thing though when they want to stay, because perhaps they've been enjoying some progress and maybe the companies that some of the expatriates are working with favors them, and so they want to stay in Nigeria. But it just sounds funny. I don't know if it sounds funny to anyone else. The way Swift Adenrito puts it, like Oyibo people claiming they're from Ekiti State, not just from any other place from Ilaje. So would they now be selling land?
Yeah.
When we buy land, do we also have to settle them? Are they now money-less there?
You know, we have a lot of illegal migrants here. And I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago that Nigerian government decided to sanitize that environment, and actually during the Buhari regime. And they were all asked to register their presence in Nigeria. And that's what you find, that of course, when expatriates are coming and they're looking for a way to ship human beings to other people's country, and some of them passes through the back door to come into the country without proper documentation. And that really poses some risk. But of course, you know, it's like the same story everywhere. When you see raid happening elsewhere, and you see how your people too are running and looking for hideouts. So they could become a hideout. And any place could actually be a hideout where, of course, they can run away from the purview of the immigration service. But I think it's just good that people document properly and live in an environment legally.
You know, if Nigeria, you know, if someone should tell you that in Nigeria there are actually people who scuttle their way into this country and they are hiding and perching somewhere and they are running away from immigration officers, sometimes you will doubt. Like in this country,
why?
Because of the jackals.
We don't want to.
No.
You know, most times we do not acknowledge.
No,
except
you don't interact with foreigners. The most difficult visa to get on earth is Nigerian
visa.
So why?
Our neighbors, talking about our neighbors, the contiguous countries that just walk into.
You mean our African neighbors?
Yes, they just walk in and walk, stroll in and stroll out. Some of them have become Nigerians in another sense.
You see, you may not even be seeing what is around you, but a lot of people who are seeing it from the outside. A friend of mine was a lawyer, told me all the energy one Sweden woman put in to get residency in Nigeria, and it was really willing to pay as much. In short, what was even motivation? The motivation was the fact that the son is just enough.
Well, for those who were...
Just welder. Ordinary weather was enough.
The son of the woman.
The weather, sun.
Oh, okay.
Sunlight.
The sun.
Because of the
That's what
very
she
cold
was
region
enough.
she's coming
Oh,
from.
boy.
For her to stay around.
And yet some persons would complain, it's too sunny, can we have rainfall?
Okay.
When you have rainfall for a while, can just
we
be
have some
sunny.
sun, please?
Human beings.
God bless Nigeria.
Indeed, human wants are insatiable. All right, moving on to some stories that made it into the news. We'll begin from a very interesting one that has to do with shipping companies bleeding developing countries $11 billion in lost taxes, according to a report. So up to $11 billion in potential tax revenue is slipping through the fingers of developing economies each year due to tax loopholes exploited by global shipping giants, according to a new report by Opportunity Grain. So Opportunity Grain says that the developing countries are not taking advantage of the tax system to get enough from shipping companies. And there seem to be, particularly countries who are part of the OECD, and there seems to be a loophole there that some of the shipping companies take advantage of, and which is the tonnage tax. Taxes paid on the ton of whatever shipments that the shipping companies carry rather than profit. So companies that are making huge profit and paying tonnage tax, is like the tax is not able to get enough because of the tax system that some of these countries operate. So we'll be talking about the shipping industry, particularly in Nigeria, how much that we have a lot of foreign participation, taking a major stake of it before the indigenous companies. And it's not just Nigeria, it seems to be a challenge for developing countries to actually handle their shipping industry by themselves or have a major stake in their own shipping industries.
Yeah, I think it's a case of the same person having the yam and the knife. You can choose to cut for the next person what size pleases you. This is our fundamental challenge. And again, if you follow the thesis of Mesa Otabi in Buy Your Future, you will find that it's called the Esau mentality. You see, give me the porridge or I will just die. So most of the time, we don't really have the power to negotiate or to even see through what is happening. Now, when you look at what kind of profit that shipping companies are making, really massive. And the majority of them are actually from Europe. The 6 top shipping companies globally, they are from Europe. And they are amassing so much wealth such that the wealth that was made in the post-COVID year alone was much more than the profit they ever made. And most of these things are coming away from the poor countries of the world, where they ship all manners of things to. And of course, we cannot negotiate because we don't have the willpower, or we don't have the economic wherewithal to be able to say, well, it's either you do this or no. And I think that's the real potential problem. But you look at it in terms of relations between other development countries and Europe, and you see how Europe is exploiting other nations to even trade with them. If you look at the conversation between the diplomatic route between the US right now and the European countries, is the fact that the European countries take advantage of overtaxing and even fining their companies because they feel that, okay, we can have that negotiation power. I think Africa must grow up, or especially, let me speak for Africa, to the point that we are able to say, well, this is what we are going to do, and we need to take a lot of these things. So if a company is making over $345 billion profit in a single year, you see, that's massive. And what are we getting in return? Just taking peanuts. And then, of course, they keep telling you what you need to do to make it easier so that you can become attractive, so that they can continue to come, because we don't have alternative. So if Africans start to begin to develop themselves and work around itself, and I think we can have really power to negotiate, just as European itself will do in terms of things that come into their client.
Okay, so negotiating would then mean that we have built some level of capacity.
Capacity,
because like
yes,
you said,
of course, yeah.
the multinationals, the shipping companies own the yam, they also own the knife. So they decide who to give a portion to. So if they are the ones handling the shipping industry, or they're the major players, then they can actually hold the developing countries to ransom. I talked about the tonnage system, which was actually done in some OECD countries to encourage national shipping and also shipping companies to ensure some form of competitiveness. But we're seeing that has become like a loophole that the shipping companies are exploiting now, because making so much profit and then you're calculating tax based on ton. And some of them also have certain ways they manipulate in order not to pay so much tax, registering maybe their flagship shipping companies in tax havens so that they can also evade tax. What do you think the developing countries should do as in regards to tax reforms to be able to get as much as they should from these shipping companies? Imagine $11 billion slipping through the fingers of these developing countries because the tax reform is not sufficient to harness what could have been made from the shipping companies operating there.
Okay. There are diverse ways to look at this matter.
All right.
First of all, you mentioned the OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development Countries. About 35 or 38 of them. And Nigeria is not part of them. Nigeria is just a partner to OECDs. But the thing is, the OECD themselves, they are being exploited by these shipping organizations. And they've not been able to review the tax or the laws, the regulatory framework that should be guiding maritime activity and the shipping. $340 billion within the space of 2019 to 2023, and that is just profit alone. That is profit alone for those organizations. So if we look at that, and I look at the body language of the OECDs, including the developing nations of Africa, for which Nigeria is one of them, I intend to just look at a few things. 10 of these shipping organizations, 9 of them are European countries, and they are domiciled, their headquarters are domiciled over there in their countries. They ship and they make this profit. But when we look at the shipping and the maritime industry of the developing countries who are the receiving end, let us look at the maritime sector in some of these African countries. Egypt, when we talk about maritime fleet, Egypt has about 4,000 ships plying the Mediterranean Sea, and they have about 31 seaports. Second, Nigeria has about 28 seaports with about more than 800 ships.
Owned by
Fleet.
Nigeria?
Well, ownership, I'm not certain, but we have more than 800. Liberia is another that has quite a large fleet of maritime, but they only have 4 seaports. Angola, about 21 seaports. And we have African countries. So, and the reason for that is not far-fetched. Egypt is close to the Mediterranean Sea. And since maritime and shipping activities are what, give the nations or places a nation strategically, most especially African nations, strategically to deal with issues of trade and development and be able to have the environment or the maritime infrastructure to receive all the goods, all the products that are being imported from these developed countries into Africa, which are then shipped into the inner cities that bring forth development. And this moves from both just products to machineries that facilitate manufacturing and development. Now, if Nigeria falls under the second cadre in shipping and maritime in Africa, that means when we look at the entirety of shipping and maritime in the continent of Africa, between number 1 and number 5, Nigeria is there. Even though we can then categorize by fleets, then by the number of seaports, because if it's by the number of seaports, we come second. If it's by the number of fleets, we come second. Because if it is by the number of fleets also, we are like 5th in the world.
Fleets, let's look at ownership
number of
fleets.
ships.
Because the ownership of the fleets will determine what power you have to even regulate the sector.
Well, you have provided an environment. There is a market. If there is a market that requires certain products that need to be ferried across the Mediterranean Sea, and that market is in West Africa, a majority of that market by way of population, Nigeria is in the advantaged position. They want to make that inroad into Nigeria. And when we are a destination that attracts such market, then we have some form of leverage to have to dictate. Leverage? Oh, of course we do, because this is our country. You are bringing in your goods here. It's obvious that there is a market here. So
there is a market,
and apart from that,
because you talked about the number of fleets
yes.
that Nigeria has. So I'm asking about ownership of the fleet, because if you don't own the fleet, it means that the shipping companies can determine the price and how they operate. So that may mean that, yes, you're supposed to be a commercial hub because of your location and because you have ports that are really viable, economically viable. But you may, to do business or to have goods ferried through your ports may be very, very expensive because of the shipping costs. And that will not be leverage anymore for the consumers within their region, because it becomes very expensive for goods coming in through their ports.
Now, thank you very much. Tax framework is what we are talking about. We don't, when we are churning out laws and taxes that should govern our maritime sector, first of all, we're not putting in consideration the people that patronize us first. First, we need to make ourselves a destination that are attractive to these people.
So now we're
the real problem with making yourself attractive is the exact point that I'm making. If we have to make ourselves attractive, what other people are asking is that remove all the opportunity for you to make money. So that, you see, when you look at Porter's 5 laws of competitiveness, one of the things he had argued that a nation can either compete on differentiation or they compete on the point of price, or a blend of both. Now, most African, our strategy is always to compete on price, lower the price so that you can attract people. The question is, for how long are you going to be lowering that price? Because you are the same one who has this deficit in terms of infrastructure that are not built. They come back to haunt you to say, oh, you have to invest in infrastructure, you don't have capacity, but you don't have resources to build capacity because you are underpriced. And this is how the West has dealt with the developing nation over the years. And I think that is why that news headline talks about bleeding developing nations, taking advantage of our vulnerability and then exploit us maximally. So that is the point here. How can we take more from them so that we can also build first world infrastructure? That for me would have been the conversation. We have Tinkan Port, Apapa Port. Infrastructure has not been upgraded. since it was built. Same level. Lagos just had one deep sea port that is built now. On a port is hardly operational. The Warri port is hardly operational. So this is where the activities here in this front. But a lot of things are coming into our waters. How do we maximize what we get from these people who are making so much money on top of us? That you have to rent one container that used to be about $4,000. Now it's about $10,000. A 40-foot container, just empty container to ship your goods. So why can't we also charge them some premium so that we can also invest in our infrastructure? And that for me is where I use the framework of Mesa Otabi, that we are more like Esau nation, and all we think about is just kill the animal, eat it. And we don't think about investing in basic infrastructure that really gives you the opportunity to also charge premium. These are the things that we must do as a country. We need to invest in our basic infrastructure and then, of course, use it as a basis for negotiation. But the problem is that when you get to a negotiation table with an empty stomach and you are pressed for food, otherwise you will die, just like the story of Esau in the Bible says, give me this red porridge or I will die. And what use is birthright to me? So that's what we're seeing with African nations, that many of us see that, oh, birthright doesn't mean anything to us. So if I die, what will be the use of the birthright? We will not necessarily die. It's for us to be able to do our things well and see how we can invest in basic infrastructure, and then we'll be able to actually charge premium for some of the things we do. So I feel it's us thinking inward.
Okay, so that's why I was referencing taxation. You know, if you look at all the shipping companies that were mentioned, recently when the Nigerian customs came out to increase some form of tariff on importers and exporters and shipping, and a particular shipping company, is it the CGM and CAG and CGM, which is like a French company that's into shipping. It is one of the 4 major shipping companies in the world. It is also among the shipping company that was mentioned in this excerpt. And it is saying that that means it's part of the companies that carted away those $340 billion profit.
In 4 years.
In 5 years, 2019 to 2023. And Nigeria, since it is also domiciled here in Nigeria and other African countries, it is part of that chunk. So Nigeria should look at all this and go back to the drawing board. Now, remember that those who were complaining were the local businessmen, because they went ahead to increase. They told them Nigerian customs had increased that. The NPA gave an increase, citing that they've not done that for quite a number of years, and they need to upgrade infrastructure on the port. So they went up and increased theirs too. Now, we are, with that number, with that amount of profit that these shipping organizations are taking away from Africa, from the continent of Africa, because about $174 billion, that means almost half, if not a little bit more than half of that $340 billion was taken from less developed countries. I don't think that's a profit they will want to forego, because we review our regulatory and tax system to tax them a little bit more, because we need to have something to upgrade the level of infrastructure in the maritime sector in Nigeria or in other African countries. I don't think that's the level of profit they will want to just throw aside and say, oh, we'll stop doing business with you. No. Then we have to empower our local shipping lines to make sure they take care of that. Just the same thing that is happening in the aviation sector, where Festus Keyamo is really making relationships with Canada and with other European countries to make sure that there is, with one ticket, you can get to more than 3 destinations, or you can get a straight flight from Lagos down to a place like Canada and to other countries where it didn't exist before, using the BASA instrument that governs the airspace. So we should emulate that, and it should be replicated in the maritime industry. And instead of the government, because it's going to serve as a tax haven for the administration, for the government to really tap into this, the maritime sector. If we do not do that and we are only focusing attention on other aspects, I think we'll be on the losing side. Imagine losing out $11 billion. And with the strategic position that Nigeria is, I took a little calculation to look at the $11 billion. If converted to Naira, that's about 16.8 trillion Naira. And if it is in 4 or 5 years, that's about $55 billion. And if we convert that, then we're having about 84 trillion Naira. Imagine Nigeria having about 30% of that chunk of 84 trillion Naira because of the strategic position that we occupy when it comes to maritime in the African continent.
Yeah, but you see, the thing that is not measured is the fact that this is taking advantage of the loopholes in our laws.
Yes.
And rather than us focusing on the major things that happen, we see one week, one trouble. We're majoring in minors. That the things that we're supposed to be looking at, government's supposed to be looking at, this is a source of revenue that we're losing to foreigners who come in, exploit us, and just go away. And see, how can we really make more money from these people? We don't think about that, and so we keep fighting ourselves and
over VAT.
Spend huge energy. Even the one over politics is worse than even the one on the VAT. And like I said, really, because, you know, the feeding bottle economy that we run is the one that actually is it. Everybody just wants, at the end of the day, you get something at least to share. But people are not looking at where more money can actually come in. So I think that we need, as a people, to strengthen our tax laws and regulations so that we have to modernize it as time changes, to accommodate for new opportunities that I imagine, so that we're not losing out at both ends. It's not just enough for African countries to go out and be begging money. We have seen that, yes, we may not be celebrating Junta here. The young man in Burkina Faso has demonstrated that it is possible for African actually to do some things without necessarily relying on foreign power. We saw him turn down a decision by Saudi to come and build mosques in his country and say that's not what we need. People need schools, they need hospitals, they need good roads. They don't need more mosques. We saw him turn down loans from IMF. I said, I don't need it. There are so many things we can commercialize within our environment that give us money. And I think we need more African leaders who will be bold enough to actually look at these people in the face and say, well, if you want to do business with us, come to the table and let us negotiate. But not negotiating from the point of weakness, which has been the bane of African industrialization.
Sir, this Open Opportunity Green Report says that if the tax system in developing countries, if the tax system in the shipping industry was fair, governments of those countries would have gotten $42 billion.
Yes.
And that would be able to take care of food aid program and some other aid programs that they are depending on foreign agencies to provide sponsorship for. Now, I'll talk on the commercialization of the shipping industry. You know, you're talking about the number of fleets that Nigeria has. So let's make the distinction between Nigerian-owned vessels and Nigerian flagged vessels. Yes, there are Nigerian flagged vessels, meaning that these vessels have been registered to operate within Nigerian maritime industry, but Nigerian-owned vessels are not that much. That's why we have a lot of foreign companies being the ones majorly operating the Nigerian maritime industry, because we don't own those vessels. They just operate here. So in terms of Nigeria's contribution to the global maritime industry, it's very low. So we need to invest in that segment. We need to invest in that segment of our economy if we are to be able to harness the gains. Yes, it's good for us to review the tax laws. And there are also some international tax laws that may make it difficult for certain companies for you to get more tax for them because they've registered the headquarters of their companies maybe in tax havens. But there are still a lot that can be done. There are loopholes that can be closed so that more taxes can be gotten. But for you to even negotiate, you still need to develop your own capacity so that while you're negotiating, it is not negotiating from a standpoint of from a disadvantageous position that they are holding you to ransom, because if you are asking them to pay more tax or if you're reviewing the taxes, because they control the markets or they control the industry, then you can't do much. But if you're also able to improve, even if it's just domestic cargo, you're able to cover that aspect significantly, then you'll be better able to negotiate. Because this sample was done on 139 global shipping companies. So it's a lot. And for the report to state the countries that are losing out, it means that this needs to change for developing countries to be able to gain. If you have companies that are operating within your waterways, they are benefiting a lot, doing business, ferrying, and sometimes even extracting your resources, your maritime resources, that you are unable to extract because you do not even have the infrastructure, you do not have the equipment to do that. So it is key that Nigeria, African countries, and other developing countries do this, invest in maritime sector, and also review the taxes, the tax laws rather.